Hey folks, Dan Brusky here. Just got done with the Convocation Chapel up here at Midwestern, so I figured I'd come over to the library and record a video to go with our Unit 2 announcements. The way that I usually structure these announcements is that the first portion, I want to go over any questions or issues that came up last week. A lot of people send emails and you don't get to see all the emails that people send, so I figured this would be an opportunity to just learn from what other people ran into. And then we'll take a look at what's going on this week in the course. Look at the topics that we're covering, any assignments you need to be aware of, and then the last section we will just kind of look forward in the course a little bit and anticipate what may be coming up. So the first issue that came up was the problem we were having with the digital lessons. Basically, we've had this kind of problem before, but it's never been this bad. Usually in the past, when someone completes a digital lesson, even if it doesn't record the score properly, it'll at least send me like a 0 so that I know that you've completed it. At this point, it's not sending me anything, so I have no idea whether you've completed a digital lesson or not unless you let me know that. The other thing I wanted to talk about was basically each time that you take a quiz, you're going to have vocabulary in there, and the answers are going to be limited. Like the key, we can only put so many definitions or glosses or whatever in the key. So inevitably, some of you, if you put maybe 2 glosses for a word, it's not going to recognize your answer as one of the correct answers because you're giving 2 correct answers instead of one of them. Every week, usually on Mondays, I try to do it on Sunday or Monday, I will go back through the quizzes, I will look at what the system marked you off on, and I will check and see whether you should actually be marked off for that, and I will give you the points back if you got it correct, but the computer just didn't recognize it. So I've gone through and done that for all of the Unit 1 quizzes. At this point, if you still have a question about something that is marked incorrect, feel free to reach out and let me know. But give me until about Tuesday to go through those quizzes and check the answers and then give you points back before you get concerned that you're not going to get credit for something. Because again, I usually wait until everybody's done with the quizzes, and that's usually the deadline. So Sunday and Monday is when I go through those. Let's take a look at this week. We're going to look at I-Yod and I-Aleph verbs. I-Yod verbs in particular, there are kind of 2 categories of verbs that begin with a yod. They break down into 2 basic groups. The first group is what we call the I-Yod Vav. These are verbs who in ancient Hebrew, historically in the language, they actually didn't begin with a yod. They originally began with a vav. So think of yeshav. Yeshav is he sat or he dwelt or something like that. That used to be not yashav, but washav or vashav with a vav there. And over time, as the language developed, that initial vav was replaced by the yod. The reason why that's important to know is for these I-Yod Vav verbs, when they are conjugated, you're going to notice that that yod switches back to a vav again, and that's why they're going to look so irregular. So that's one category of I-Yod. The other, instead of I-Yod Vav, these are called true I-Yods. True I-Yods are Hebrew verbs whose root begins with a yod and has always begun with a yod. It didn't switch from vav to yod. And in these, you'll notice that the yod remains in the conjugation. Now, these verbs are really only irregular when it comes to the imperfect conjugation. The I-Yods are not really irregular in the perfect. But in the imperfect, when we start putting prefixes on them, particularly prefixes that have a vowel, the true I-Yods, that first root letter will actually marry the prefix vowel, and it will become part of the prefix vowel usually. For the I-Yod Vavs, that yod will drop out and you'll get a vav there instead. So those are the primary irregularities when it comes to the I-Yod. For the I-Alephs, it's a little bit different. This is an irregularity that you kind of just have to memorize. There are, I want to say, about 5 I-Aleph verbs that just kind of switch up the vowel pattern altogether. Furtado goes over those, so pay close attention in your book. But this is one where it's harder to explain why the irregularity occurs, and it's better usually to just memorize these forms because there's only a few of them. Another thing that I wanted to point out is one student brought to my attention an issue with the, this week we have 2 digital lessons, again, one for vocabulary and one for verbs. And in the verb digital lesson, in one of the practice items, there is a situation here where on slide 16.6, it's actually going to mark you incorrect if you are correct. This is properly parsed as a first-person common plural form of yada. That noon prefix, that's going to be the first-person plural, and we know first-person common plural prefix here. So we know that this is yada with the noon prefix, first common plural. For some reason, this lesson thinks the correct answer is third masculine singular. That's just wrong. Don't worry about it. You can ignore it. Don't let it confuse you. This is an error, and I've reported it to the course so that they know that. The other thing I want to bring up here regarding the quiz for Unit 2, we're going to go over Hebrew demonstratives. We learned this last semester. The demonstratives, again, these are the near-far pointing words. So this singular mug, or that portrait picture. I know you can't really see it here. I'm in the library at Midwestern, so this, that, these, those are the demonstratives in Hebrew. What we're going to see in this quiz, kind of reviewing that information, is that you're going to need to pay attention to how the function of the demonstrative changes based on the article. Take some time to review that from your textbook from last semester, because students tend to forget how this works. But the two functions are either, it could be, let's say, I don't know if we'd call it substantival or predicative, but if I were to say, this is my mug, that would be this functioning as a pronoun. But if I were to say, I drink from this mug, this is an adjective. It's telling me which mug. So make sure you understand how to determine the function of the demonstrative. Is it a pronoun or is it an adjective based on the article? That's just a tip for something that's going to pop up that you should know, you should remember, but take some time to review that because students often forget how the article plays into the function of the demonstrative. Finally, the video conference for this week will be Thursday, 10 a.m. Central Time. I'll try to send out a link to that 10 to 30 minutes before it starts. I usually need some time to set up all the settings and everything. Often we go for about an hour or so, or at least in the past, that's how long they've lasted if there are several people and we have questions. Sometimes I'll take it up to a couple hours. Again, you're not required to be there. I will try to record the video conference and make a link available afterwards so you can at least see what we've covered. But in the meantime, please send me any questions, any exercises, any topics that you want to go over, especially if you're not going to be present for the conference. That way I can at least record the discussion of them, and hopefully that will be helpful. That's it for this week. Looking forward, don't forget that next week, your first assignment for the local mentor is due. That's basically where you will announce who your local mentor is. So be sure to read the instructions for that. Basically, I need their first and last name and their email address, and I'll reach out to them to verify the mentorship. But selecting that mentor now, again, it's pretty much the same as previously when we've done Online Connect, where you've done the mentor option. You don't really need to meet with them at this point for the discussion, but we do need to establish who your mentor is going to be at this point, and then you can have your conversation with them later. But just be aware that next week in Unit 3, that assignment will be due. And again, all you'll have to do is submit their first and last name and their email, I believe. But do read the instructions to make sure. Finally, I have here it started as a vocabulary spreadsheet in Google Sheets where I list the lesson from Futato that we're in, and then I list the Hebrew words for that lesson, and then give an English gloss, usually related to whatever Futato provides for that word. Then I try to give you some memory aids or some notes about that word. So for example, this week we're in lesson 18, so we've got the word ruach. The idea here is I'm going to give you the glosses, then I'm going to give you some sort of memory aid, hopefully, or just some other note about the verb. So here, I always remembered this one because of how much breath I needed in order to pronounce ruach. So to say ruach, especially that uach, that chet at the end, you need a lot of breath there, ruach. So that just ties breath to ruach for me. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, but I will put a link to this not only in the announcement that I am publishing with this video, but I'll actually go ahead and add this into the course as well. So if you go to the course, you go to modules somewhere, I will put it here in important course information. That way you should be able to see it. I think that's it. Hopefully week 1 was pretty easy going for you. If you have any questions, send them my way. I want to be as helpful as I can, and I hope you have a great week.